Hello, and welcome back to episode 12 of the COVID Long Haulers podcast. We share real stories from those living with long COVID, what they faced, how they're coping, and how they're surviving. Today's episode is a special little mini episode in which I, Emerson, the host of this episode, will discuss the findings of the groundbreaking Decode ME study, the largest genetic study ever conducted on myalgic encephalomyelitis, that was released just 2 days ago on August 6th. And since today, August 8th, is Severe ME Awareness Day, it felt like the perfect timing to have this conversation. As always, I'd like to mention that this podcast is for informational purposes only and not medical advice. I'm also not a researcher or a scientist, just a long hauler who's curious about long COVID and its comorbidities. And of course, we always make sure to research thoroughly and use reputable sources, but we cannot guarantee that we understood everything 100% correctly. For any listeners who may not be familiar, ME/CFS stands for myalgic encephalomyelitis, or chronic fatigue syndrome, though most people with ME prefer the term myalgic encephalomyelitis, as chronic fatigue syndrome is a term commonly used to gaslight and minimize the experience of patients. ME/CFS is a debilitating and complex disease that affects an estimated 67 million people worldwide. It's characterized by a wide range of symptoms that vary in severity and can affect multiple systems in the body. The hallmark symptom is post-exertional malaise, also known as PEM, a worsening of symptoms after even minimal physical or mental activity that is often delayed by 12 to 48 hours that last for days, weeks, or even months. Other common symptoms of ME/CFS include profound fatigue that is not relieved by rest, unrefreshing sleep, cognitive dysfunction, often referred to as brain fog, muscle and joint pain, headaches, dizziness, sensitivity to light and sound, and problems with digestion or the immune system. Roughly 80% of people with ME/CFS are female, and nearly half are housebound or even bedbound. Many became ill following an infection, like glandular fever, or more recently, COVID-19. Historically, patients were mischaracterized as having a psychological condition, leading to harmful recommendations like graded exercise therapy and cognitive behavioral therapy. Graded exercise therapy encourages patients to gradually increase physical activity even when they experience discomfort, which obviously triggers relapses due to post-exertional malaise. And CBT is centered in restructuring and modifying irrational beliefs, which suggests that ME/CFS is primarily psychological, which it is obviously not. Despite scientific advances showing ME/CFS is a neuroimmune illness, a fact recognized as far back as the 1960s, these outdated therapies persist in many healthcare systems. Due to chronic underfunding and stigma, ME/CFS remains poorly understood with no proven treatments or cure. A major issue is that the underlying causes of ME/CFS are still not fully known. There are no biomarkers for ME/CFS and no definitive diagnostic tests. It remains a diagnosis of exclusion, often made after ruling out other conditions. As a result of this underfunding, full recovery is extremely rare, estimated at under 5%. And this is what makes the Decode ME research so groundbreaking. For the first time, we have solid genetic evidence that helps us understand what might cause ME/CFS, proving once again that ME is a neuroimmune condition and paving the way for targeted treatments. This study was a collaboration between the University of Edinburgh, ME charities, and patients that was launched back in 2022. The Decode ME study set out with a powerful goal to investigate the biological roots of ME/CFS by identifying common genetic variants that might increase a person's risk of developing the disease. As mentioned, the causes of ME/CFS have remained largely unknown, which is why it has no diagnostic test. Decode ME aimed to change that by using large-scale genetic data to find answers and build a foundation for biomedical understanding. The team made sure that everyone, even those with severe and very severe ME, could participate and were not excluded from this important research. And I think this is incredibly powerful because for the first time in, I think maybe forever, bedbound patients could participate and contribute to this important research, and they were not excluded. So, Decode ME analyzed over 15,000 DNA samples from affected people who had been diagnosed with ME/CFS by a health professional. The group was overwhelmingly female, with about 84% being assigned female at birth, and it was also primarily white, pointing to diagnostic disparities and barriers to research participation for other ethnicities and people of color. The average age of the participants was about 52 years old, and nearly 60% of the participants had been living with ME for a decade. The majority, about 63%, had an infectious onset, with around 16% linking their ME/CFS to glandular fever, 3% to COVID, and over 40% to some other infection. So these participants completed questionnaires, consented to DNA testing, and their samples were compared to nearly 260,000 control participants from the UK Biobank. But why exactly did these researchers look at genes? Well, because unlike symptoms, lifestyle, or even biomarkers, your DNA doesn't change when you get sick. That means that any differences found in the genome of people with ME/CFS are likely to be part of the cause and not the result of the disease. This makes genetics a powerful tool for uncovering underlying mechanisms that can help us understand this complex illness just a little bit better. And now to the big reveal. Decode ME found 8 significant genetic signals scattered across the genome. These are places where people with ME had a noticeably different DNA than those without. So, what do these signals point to? They point to two major things. First of all, differences in immune system genes. Some of the identified variants affect how the immune system responds to infections, aligning with the fact that ME/CFS often follows a viral or bacterial illness. And these findings support the long standing suspicion that an overactive or dysregulated immune system might trigger or perpetuate ME/CFS in susceptible individuals. And number two, neurological pathways. Several genetic signals are involved in nervous system functioning, particularly in areas related to inflammation and pain processing. This provides biological backing to the commonly reported neurological symptoms such as brain fog, sensory sensitivity, and pain. There are 3 notable genes I would like to mention at this point. The first one being RABGAP1L, which helps fight off viruses and bacteria by regulating intracellular transport related to immune defense. People with ME/CFS were found to produce less of this protective protein that is coded by this gene, making them more vulnerable to infections or prolonged immune activation. Another gene, SUDS3, produces a protein that helps regulate the brain's immune cells called the microglia by suppressing inflammation. A disruption here might lead to chronic neuroinflammation, contributing to cognitive dysfunction, brain fog, and fatigue. And CA10 is another compelling signal. It's been associated with chronic pain syndromes and may influence pain sensitivity in ME/CFS patients, reinforcing patient reports of widespread pain. However, the Decode ME results were not able to show why ME/CFS is a female biased disease. None of the 8 genetic signals showed a significant sex bias. However, it is important to note that the researchers have not yet tested for associations on the sex chromosomes X or Y, which might help explain the strikingly higher prevalence of ME/CFS in females once that was analyzed. And at this point, I would like to mention that Decode ME was not able to find any shared causal variants with depression or anxiety. And this strongly supports the understanding that ME/CFS is a biologically distinct disease and not a mental health condition, despite frequent misdiagnosis and stigma. So, why exactly are the results from this study so important? I think everyone living with ME will know and understand why this study and its findings are so important. ME/CFS has the lowest health related quality of life scores of pretty much any chronic illness and disabilities, but at the same time, it is one of the most underfunded. Doctors are unable to recognize it in their patients. ME is often misdiagnosed as depression, and even diagnosed patients face medical gaslighting and neglect. But this study validates lived experiences of those living with ME and grounds it in biological and scientific evidence There is now definitive proof that ME/CFS is not a mental or psychosomatic illness, but in fact caused by biophysiological mechanisms. We now know that ME/CFS is partially caused by these genetic differences, and we can build on this new knowledge. As Andy Devereux-Cook, a Decode ME co-investigator said, quote, "The vast majority of the patient population essentially has been abandoned in one way or another by families, the government, the medical system. This will be huge for the patient population. Even though it does not provide all the answers and it does not provide practical assistance, it is a welcome drop in the ocean towards a turning tide." End quote. A lot more needs to be done to fully understand ME/CFS, and the team of Decode ME already plans to analyze sex chromosomes to better understand the female bias of the disease, dive deeper into HLA genes, which regulate the immune system and could hold key insights, and expand their studies to include more people of color and people of more diverse ancestries. We need researchers whose expertise is directly relevant to these 8 genetic signals, especially those who've never worked on ME/CFS before, to come forward and to help us explain more precisely what these findings mean. Research on this area needs to continue. As Sonia Chowdhury, CEO of Action for ME, said, "We've gone from knowing next to nothing about the causes of ME/CFS to giving researchers clear targets." Thank you so much for listening to our podcast episode. We hope you enjoyed it, learned something new, and maybe feel a little more hopeful. I know that I definitely feel a lot more hopeful. As a reminder, while our discussions offer medical related insights, this is not medical advice. Always consult your healthcare team with any of your medical concerns. If you'd like to connect with our community, you'll find a link to our Discord in the show notes, along with our Substack and socials. We aim to release episodes monthly, so please subscribe and stay tuned for future episodes. Until the next time, this is the COVID Long Haulers podcast signing off. See you on the next one.